Welcome to Bon Nuts, where we'll be applying the Manzer or mostly Thurlow scale of quantitative analysis of pop culture narrative through a binary system.
This podcast contains spoilers, mature content, and language. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, and welcome to a special edition of The Lost Signals Reviews Movies. We're doing an interview today with a movie we actually discussed last week. On the horn with us is Mike Lombardo. He is the director of I Am Dreaming of a White Doomsday.
And writer and producer.
And makeup artist.
And whatever else you've done on this movie. Single-handedly responsible for the creation of this film.
Yeah, and let us just say this is an award-winning movie. We met Mike at New Jersey HorrorCon 2018, and we saw him win Best Special Effects and Best Picture. And we did not see the picture, so...
at least at the time.
So, I definitely had to go up to him and, be like, hey, introduce myself. Got along, got a screener, so, hey, thanks, Mike.
You got some inside pull in the industry,
Right on. I love my job. So, Mike, before we start, I want to give our viewers a chance to watch the trailer. Sure. Because if you haven't seen this movie, I'm going to warn everybody right off the bat that we are going to spoil the shit out of this movie. If you want,
time.
Yeah.
This is super
spoilers. Spoilers ahead.
If you want to see a spoiler-free discussion, go back to our review of I'm Dreaming of a White Doomsday. So if you give me a second, we're going to show the trailer and enjoy.
Mommy, I'm hungry. Merry Christmas!
Okay.
That looks incredible. Where can I see it?
The great trailer, Mike. I love the way it was cut together.
Why don't you tell us?
Actually, that is one thing I want
Pirate Bay.
to... What'd you say?
Probably where you can see it.
What was that? I missed that.
I said Pirate Bay. That's probably where you can see
Pirate Bay. Well, I won't say it. One thing about the trailer I thought was interesting. I'm going to discuss the trailer before we get to this movie. Is that the movie's got it's a real character piece. It's a slow burn, but you look at the trailer and the trailer is cut perfectly. Because I
agree.
As we were talking about the movie before, it's given the nature of it, it's an really easy movie to spoil. And also considering it's a slow burn and everything, it was probably interesting. I'm interested in how you went about cutting the trailer to that.
With great trepidation. We tried to cut that trailer so many times, and it was really difficult because one of the things that we did in the movie that I was really going for was I wanted it to be anti-cinematic. If that makes any sense. I wanted everything to feel extremely naturalistic, and there's no big moments or anything. That doesn't really make sense, but I was trying to keep things very low key. So when you cut a trailer normally, when you make a movie normally, there is...
You put something flashy or whatever as well.
Yeah, there's something flashy. There's always these moments, really, really defining moments of dialogue that you can almost cut together, especially trailers now because they're 9 minutes long and they give away the entire movie.
Man.
Yeah.
So they're always it would say we'd have the dad saying but it's the apocalypse, and then it would cut to her like saying something. I don't know, that's a terrible example, but there's always these big like quotable lines, and Doomsday has very little dialogue to begin with, and the dialogue it does have, the characters never actually talk about the world. Because in my head, we're just going to dive right into spoilers, I guess. Because
go for it.
Like,
your movie.
When you're in a situation like that, why the fuck would you talk about it? It's like, suppose that you're like in a fucking a bombed out city, right? And it's just like, hey, remember that time this fucking city got bombed and then like the Nazis invaded? Like, you don't talk about it. You're there.
You don't sit there. You don't sit there and spout out expository dialogue.
It's going to feel like exposition, like falsely. When
the world ends, where's your fish out of water character?
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're not gonna. Yeah, it's just like hey, honey, it's info dump.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
Exactly.
Hey, just while you were in your coma, I just want to let you know we moved into a bomb shelter. Here's what you missed.
So it was really hard to cut a trailer out of that. And the other thing is, I think it was Christopher Figg, who produced Hellraiser. He said this famously, or not famously, but I'm obsessed with Hellraiser, so to me it's very famous. He said the first thing that you need to do when you finish making a film is get it as far away from the director as possible and then cut your trailers and make your poster. Because the director is going to want to represent the movie as artistically and honestly as perfectly as possible so the audience knows what they're getting into. And the producer wants to put asses in seats.
Yeah.
So if you look at it, depending on what side of the equation you're on, it's a horrible thing or a beautiful thing. And I'm more in the camp where I want people to know what they're about to watch, because I find that if an audience is expecting one thing and gets another, then they're going to be extremely upset.
They'll get annoyed, yeah.
And get annoyed, and myself included. Like, I really hate when movies are misrepresented, especially if they're like genre blending films, and then people are like, that's not even a horror movie, or that's not this at all. There's been times where I feel like I've been sold a very different product than what I see. So I really wanted to try to make the trailer represent the movie as accurately as I could. And I hope that I did that, but we went back and forth a fuckload of times, and I was very scared. And then when I put the text in, the no food, no hope, no L, everyone was like lambasting me, like, you cannot do that. And I'm like, I'm telling you, I was going to use that as the tagline, originally on the poster. And then I'm like, that's kind of funny.
It's awesome. I loved it.
Yeah, but like it works. And the other tagline I had was "Season's greetings from the end of the world," and I felt like that was a little more sinister.
I like no hope.
Fucked up, but the no food, no hope, no all. I'm like, that's the perfect like trailer break.
It totally is. Yeah.
Well,
it works.
The other thing that was cool about that, the way we put it in the trailer, the no hope clip, no food clip, is the fact that it gave you that tension. It gave you that.
Yep.
Let's put it this way: in lieu of using stock footage of a hydrogen bomb going off, which you could have used because people throw shit in the trailer all the time that's not in the movie.
Yeah, that drives me fucking batshit nuts.
It's insane. But I mean, the fact that really helped. Like I was talking about when we watched the movie. I mean, the fact that you did the flashbacks and the dream sequences you did it in a cut. You didn't do any kind of like, hey, we're moving into this. It kind of helped keep you on your toes.
Yeah.
And when you cut the trailer by having that no hope, it did add that kind of like cinematic cliche on the one hand, but it was like really what you needed, because otherwise there really isn't a lot of action going on in this film.
Exactly. I was like, we were trying to cut like a dramatic trailer, and I'm like, what the fuck are we going to use? Like, here's a shot of someone walking around. Here's a shot of them sitting. Like, no one talks and says anything.
Now
like,
you put a jump scare skeleton to put asses in seats, as you said.
Yeah.
Well,
then we put that shot of Santa at the end, and then everyone thinks it's a fucking slasher movie.
It's really funny.
Well, the thing about whoever you got to play Santa, and I'm sorry I'm blocking his name.
Shannon Moyer.
Shannon Moyer. He carries himself really well. That even like I didn't watch the trailer until after I'd seen the movie.
Yeah.
And knowing the pathos he gives and his regret and remorse seem to be the themes of the film.
Up to the production as well.
He does carry, like, maybe it's a hindsight thing, but to me, the way he walks, the clip you show him, he doesn't look menacing at all. He kind of does look like
him to be very. I talked a lot with him about he's very haggard.
Yeah, he's put upon.
He's on his last legs, and the sack is this terrible burden that he has, and it's just very, very heavy.
Yeah, and I was
it's
gonna say,
metaphorical.
From the body language, like you absolutely get that. It's not like I can see why you say it's funny that people think it's a slasher movie, like Santa's coming to kill you.
Yeah,
but from that pose, it's like, nah, Santa's like worn down, man. Like,
it's like Santa's ready to check out.
Yeah,
this isn't Silent Night, Deadly Night.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people think that, and it's like people are used to my history with Real Splatter. We always do horror comedy, and Santa has been a recurring image in our movies for years. I'm obsessed. I have a weird obsession with using Santa Claus in terrible things.
Now we got something to pitch you then later on. Go on.
But everyone's like, oh my god, Mike made a feature. Like, Real Splatter's got a full-length movie. This is going to be hilarious. And I always go to people and I assure you it's not. I promise you, you will not be smiling when the credits roll.
Yeah.
No.
No one believes me. And then their allergies act up and then when the movie is playing.
Yep. Nah, I just thought that was amazing. Like, yeah, I wasn't. You're right. It's funny because I guess if you, as you said, if people know your history, like, oh, it's gonna be like lighthearted, like Santa's doing whatever. You're like, nah, man, this is some intense shit. This is pretty, like, serious shit.
But I mean, with the title and stuff too, like, it's very easy for someone to assume that it's gonna be
some kind of parody thing.
No matter what I do, no matter how serious I am, I can't get away from my sick sense of humor.
Well, I mean, just the name of it, I'm dreaming of a White Doomsday. Of course, it's going to prick up everybody's ears. Because it is kind of nebulous in a way. Because on the one hand, yeah, you do kind of expect a horror comedy, but then you look at then if we hadn't seen the movie, if we had looked at the trailer, I would have been like, "This isn't a comedy. I'm not even sure this is a horror movie." But
it straddles the line.
Yeah,
no, but that
in
is
a great way.
But that is what I said in terms of a compliment when we discussed the movie, because it does work on many levels. And I could recommend this movie to people who don't generally like horror movies. But, I know my aunt was really big in the 80s about, like, recommending, like, these, like, hey, this is after nuclear war. Let's watch a movie where everybody watches each other die. Which we had discussed.
And Merry Christmas.
Yeah, and Christmas, too. And, we definitely recommend it over It's a Wonderful Life. And
I recommend almost anything. Like I said, this is the anti-Wonderful Life, and that's why I fucking loved it.
So when we world premiered at Nightmares Film Festival, the website Morbidly Beautiful, the woman that was writing for them, I cannot remember her name, unfortunately, but she came up to me and she was so excited to see the movie. She's like, I love Christmas horror. I'm so looking forward to it. I can't wait. I gave her a poster and signed it. She was all super happy. Go into the screening. Come out of the screen. She didn't say a word.
That's amazing. That's so good.
At the end of that screening, everybody was crying. So, waiting like a couple days, and they finally post like a recap of the festival on the website. And all it said was, there's a picture of me and her together with the poster, and then it said, White Doomsday was next on the schedule, and it said the anti-feel-good movie of the year, and then just went to the next movie and reviewed it in depth.
Yes. Like, dude, you have to use that as a log line or something.
Yeah, seriously.
Perfect.
Whoever quoted that, put that on the quote. When you release it on Blu-ray and DVD, have that one line just like the anti-feel-good movie of the year.
100%.
That's one of our one of my favorites was, I think it was the East Coast Horror Group said it was one gut punch after another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the best way. Like, again.
The blurbs that we've gotten from reviews have been fucking hilarious.
That's
the one guy
amazing.
said the throat punch holiday movie of the year.
Hell yeah. That's fucking sweet too. So like on that line, I think we mentioned it in our actual review, and I think this was your logline as well, aside from the No Food, No Hope, Noel. It's like The Road meets America on 31st Street.
Yeah,
and I was like, that's perfect too.
That's the elevator pitch.
Yeah, you cannot get a better elevator pitch than that to describe what this movie is like. And again, that's the kind of shit that I was into, which I was super enthusiastic about checking it out. Like I said, like I mentioned, sight unseen. Like when we were checking out the program for HorrorFest, the HorrorCon, Steve and I saw the movie. Speaking of him, Steven Amosi, who is not here. He was like, dude, look at the title of this movie. And I said, yeah, that's awesome. We got to go see it. Like, for sure. That definitely got to lock it down. Unfortunately, we just get around to it at the con. But
Yeah.
like seriously, based on title alone, it's attention grabbing, and I think the best way.
I was gonna say out of the
Got me with
awards,
that.
out of the awards, everything they're like, hey, from this movie, this movie, this movie. Yours was the one that had the title that kind of grabbed everybody. So congratulations on that. Congratulations
For sure.
on your wins. What I want to do is actually go back real quick. And you did makeup on this, and how'd you get started? I know you started on makeup. You started on makeup first, correct? Or
As far as like my career,
yeah, how did you?
Also, I've been doing this stuff since I was a kid. Halloween, I was always obsessed with, and
Yep.
my mom would always go to the Halloween store the day after Halloween and just buy out all the props and stuff and give them to me as birthday and Christmas presents because that's what I was into. So every year for Christmas, I would write on my Christmas list fake body parts.
That's awesome.
And which, understandably so, is that my mom was very concerned about this and told my dad, like, why does he want like severed limbs for Christmas? But one year I opened an unmarked box and screamed with delight because there were severed heads and arms. She finally had gotten them.
Merry Christmas,
And-
Mikey.
I was so excited. And, most kids, they play with like stuffed animals and shit. I would watch like Chud and I'd position all the body parts around my living room and pretend I was in the movie. And like, I did weird shit when I was a kid. But I learned how to do makeup effects from all the prosthetics and all the, Halloween stuff. Like growing up in the early 90s, it was a horror fan. It was a beautiful thing because everything was like gross slime and blood and gross, horror shit everywhere. So I learned how to do all that stuff, and I was obviously obsessed with making movies. So I got a VHS camcorder for Christmas one year, and I started making my own stuff. And then as I got older, I got more into makeup and more into filmmaking, and then, that's here we are today.
Snowballed from there, if you will.
Are you? You're pretty much a self-taught director, then I'm assuming.
Yes, which most people would say is painfully obvious.
Yeah. I don't know.
No.
I said that's pretty fucking impressive for real.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Yeah,
I wasn't fishing for compliments. Don't worry.
But seriously, I didn't know that. Or like Chris had mentioned it like way after we had actually seen the film. I was like, oh man, clearly this guy went to school or like studied film, or at least knows how to make a fucking film.
Well, yeah, when you watch enough film, I mean, there is a certain amount of intuitiveness, but it's not just that. It's being able to. You read a lot of stuff. You watch the behind the scenes extras. It's kind of like
I'm not like like emerge knowing how to make a movie. I've researched this shit
right.
Sure.
obsessively. Like I have so many books on film. I've talked to so many other directors and commentary tracks behind the scenes. Actually, one of the things I remember as a kid was there used to be a show on AMC called Movie Magic. I don't know if you guys remember this.
I vaguely do. Yeah.
So I watched, and they did an episode about a movie called Death Becomes Her, a Robert Zemeckis movie. You don't like Zemeckis or the Death Becomes Her?
That movie, I remember. Yeah,
I think it's okay, but not great.
Oh, it's amazing. It's one of the movies that made me want to be an effects artist. It's a feature-length episode of Tales from the Crypt. It's great.
Yeah.
I'll give
But
you
Tales
that.
from the Crypt
I'll
is so
give
much
you that.
better. Anyway,
Yeah, I love Tales from the Crypt. Was one of the other huge influences on me as a kid.
that also.
So they did a thing on how they did the makeup for that movie, which was like revolutionary stuff. And I fucking lost my mind. I was like, oh my god, this is like what I like, but it's a job. And I'm like, holy shit, like I need to do this. So that was a big thing for me. And I mean, I grew up watching like 90s shot on video movies and stuff. So Troma was a big influence on me. So I learned a lot of special effects stuff from Troma. Excuse me. Lately it's been the Stan Winston School of Character Arts. They do, these beautifully extensive DVD, tutorials with, all their artists. So like you can learn how to build an animatronic T-Rex in your living room if you want to.
Sick.
I mean, they're ludicrously expensive. We're talking like $80 a DVD.
Sure,
And I
but-
have like 27 of them now. But I learned so much by watching my favorite effects artists just literally sit in a room for 7.5 hours and just do an effect. And they just talk. Okay, I can't remember what the hell I was saying.
The DVD tutorials about special effects.
Oh, Stan Winston, yeah. So when I'm watching these tutorials, it's like I watch like for instance like Gary Tunnicliffe doing throat slash. I know how to slash someone's throat. I've done it 100 times. But watching him do it, he's like, okay, well we use this and that or whatever, and I'm like watching this like Academy Award winning makeup artists doing these effects, and I'm like, holy shit, this is exactly the process that I do. Just based on into like, okay, well, this needs to be this and this. I need to use these materials. I have to hide a tube. How do I do it? watching them do the same things but with better equipment was like hugely eye-opening for me. I'm like, holy shit, I am doing it right. They just
I got the basics,
a couple steps, or they have better stuff than me. And like that's really awesome to see that I'm coming to the same conclusions that they are, just based on experience.
Just with not high-end equipment, but it's the same general technique and the same general setup.
Exactly, because you know, honestly, 90% of being an effects artist is problem solving, and that's the same thing with filmmaking. It's just a giant pile of issues and tech problems, and it's just how you can think on your feet and solve them is what makes you a good or bad director, really, when it comes down to it.
Exactly. All right. In terms of like influences on this thing, we had discussed one of the things that really got me about the film, and one of the reasons I can't let this film go is because growing up in the Cold War, seeing things like The Day After, Threads, Testament, When the Wind Blows, etc. There's a lot of that. Basically, apocalypse. Now what? All right, we've survived. Now what's going? How are we going to survive? Going into this movie? Because I know we're gonna. This is probably gonna segue into the fact that it was you did write it first as a short story.
Yes.
So when you were writing this as a short story, when you were going into it for a movie, considering it's not like your typical horror movie, it's not like a horror comedy that you're used to. What approach did you take to the short story? What approach did you take to the movie? And I'll let you go from there.
So you asked me about influences on the film itself. So I'll say the biggest influences on the movie, as I'm obsessed with apocalyptic stuff.
I'm with you.
The biggest influences were a book called On the Beach by Neville Shute.
Yep.
It's written in the 50s. If you're not familiar with it, it's about a small town in Australia, and World War III happens. Everyone gets nuked except Australia, and the radiation is coming down on the wind. So they know they're going to die. They have 2 months to live. And then it's basically what this group of characters does, living in their normal town normally,
in that time,
knowing that they're all going to die, and like how they all handle that. And that book fucked me up for like 3 weeks straight. I had crying jags every night, and it was a beautiful thing. That was a big influence. The fuck am I? Metro 2033, the game, and Metro Last Light, and the books.
The novels I was going to say that are based on, right? Yeah.
By Dmitry Glukovsky.
Yep.
I'm mispronouncing that terribly. My Russian is a bit rusty.
Me too. I always do.
Yeah. Those books and games are just fucking phenomenal. And when I was this is after I wrote the short story, I played the game finally, and it made me realize that I could portray the apocalypse on the cheap. That makes sense, because that game, it has big set pieces, but predominantly it's story driven, and it's just the parts that struck me the most were just little things, like just going through the dead city, and you just see just little stuff is all the, I don't know how to explain this very well, but it's all the kind of stuff that I always gravitate towards and love with the imagery. And I'm like, It doesn't have to be this huge burning cityscape to be effective.
Yeah. I mean, I'll build on that because I'm glad you brought up those games because I enjoyed them as well. I played the first one like maybe a year or two after it came out, and then went back and tried to get a hold of the novel. And yeah, like it's fairly linear, right? But the way it presents like what it would be like, at least in that scenario, it's very immersive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they do a lot with a little, and it goes a long way, especially as you're saying, like attention to detail. Like it feels like you're in the metro, in like the dead metro, and then you come up on the surface briefly and so forth. But yeah, so I totally see what you mean, and I can see it as an influence for the story and the film.
Okay, and that's exactly what it is. Is you don't really see the apocalypse in that game very often. Mm-hmm. It's just glimpses here and there. Yep. Most of it takes place down in the tunnels.
Exactly.
And that's what I loved about it, is like they're not showboating this. Like when you see it, you fucking see it. It's a big deal, but then it goes back and it's like, this is not about that. It's about the story. It's about the characters. It's about living life in the situation. I love that.
Yeah, man.
And the books floored me too. So all that was a big influence, but the also some of the imagery in the game or in the movie is Resident Evil 2, which we were just talking about before the show. When she stumbles across the eaten corpse in the in the room with the gas mask.
Yep.
We refer to that as the Resident Evil 2 body every time.
That's awesome.
Just because I have an obsession with gas masks and stuff too, and that game, playing it as a kid, certainly helped that. So it wasn't a direct homage, but it's in that kind of wheelhouse where there's always corpses laying around, and like,
Yeah.
I love that you would go into a room and you would find like a diary entry, and it would give you like a little bit of backstory about like this random victim that's just sitting in the corner that's really unrelated to the rest of the game. But I just loved those little like almost death interludes. I
Yeah,
love that stuff.
exactly.
So I really wanted to do something, and just, we use that scene to imply that there is more going on than you may see, and that's something I really expanded upon from the short story going into the movie.
Yeah, I would say it's like environmental storytelling, right? So it's not like you're telling the audience outright, or you're describing it
exactly
briefly, but it's there, and like it just fills out the world. Again, it adds to the believability of the entire, like, what you're setting up at large, I would say.
Exactly. And with the apocalypse that I wanted to portray in the movie especially is when I went and said I was trying to do things that were anti-cinematic, I did not want this to be a big, showy apocalypse movie, because it almost turns into, a friend of mine had coined the term, blight porn.
Yeah, apocalypse porn. I was going to say that same shit.
That's what, like, The Road, the book and the movie, I love them for different reasons, but that movie was just, look what we've got.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's a fucking cruise ship in the middle of the street. It's like, yeah, that's great, but this movie's 2.5 hours long. There's about 40 minutes of content. Like, let's move on.
Yeah.
And it just got to be like the greatest hits highlight reel of the apocalypse. And I'm like, okay, I get it.
Yeah,
I get it.
Right.
And I didn't want to do that.
You don't want to fall into that trap, because it's easy to do that, and it becomes, stale in a sense.
It is. And it's like, I was telling my crew, like, I just want to I want to give the audience enough that they don't feel like they've been slighted. You get to see this, the end of the world, but I want to show the emptiness and the isolation of these characters, because I really needed the audience to feel that there was no other choice with what happens.
100% agree.
That's what's interesting about it, is because they always say that what your mind comes up with is probably better than you can see. And by keeping the apocalypse vague, I like the fact that they go out with gas masks, but by the same token, she's also, well, first of all, it's wintertime, but Kelly goes out with gardening gloves, and she goes out with
a shear,
a gardening shovel, a spade, yeah. And so I'm sitting there, like, in our 30th month of winter now. I'm thinking about how cold she is, but I'm also thinking, well, they're wearing gas masks. So if it's biological or chemical or radiation, she's not wearing much protection. But I mean, you're giving enough, like with the corpse, with the eaten body, you're giving enough information where you can fill in the blanks, which is something I really appreciate.
Again, exactly. And I said that on the review. And I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass, for real. Like, there's a fine line of, like you're just saying, like, you become blight porn. Like, okay, it looks cool, I guess, but what does it add to the actual, like, overall story?
You need to have still forward momentum going. Like, it's the apocalyptic exteriors were a story point. They weren't.
Right, they weren't the focal point.
That's not why people are going to go see the movie. But the thing is, when people make especially a low budget apocalyptic movie, you always see characters endlessly walking through old train yards in the woods.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because
it's easy to shoot that
rusted stuff. Yeah, and it's free. And it's easy to sneak into, and the woods are the woods.
Yeah.
I hate that. If there's an apocalypse of any magnitude like they would have in a movie, then all the greenery would be dead. Yeah. There would be none of it. So it's just lazy filmmaking. So
agree.
When we had our location scout, Taruga, he was an urban explorer. I met this guy at a film festival.
That's awesome.
I'm kind of jumping all over the place here, but
go for it.
I met him at a film festival. I was judging the makeup contest. It was a horror film festival, and there was zombie makeup, and he dressed as a Dawn of the Dead zombie, so he had blue skin, and I'm like, this guy is fucking awesome. So I started talking to him, and he's like, yeah, I'd really like to get involved in the movies. And one day he Facebook messaged me. He's like, were you working on anything? I'd like to help. And I was like, well, I'm currently trying to figure out if I could shoot this apocalypse thing, but I don't think I can. He's like, well, what can I do to help? And I'm like, you don't have access to like a half dozen abandoned locations, do you? Not 30 seconds later, he starts sending me photographs of every location you've seen in the movie, pretty much, outside of the bomb shelter, all the abandoned stuff, with him in a gas mask there, because that's like his hobby is
that's awesome.
Photography and urban exploration. So he's like, I'll take you out. We'll go on a location scouting trip. So we spent 8 hours driving all over the town, and we found all these places, and I'm like, holy fucking shit. This is incredible.
Perfect. Like,
we can do this.
That's really sweet.
Mike, you said you shot this over 3 years, or I mean, did you?
Well, it was 2 years, edging in 2.5 years, then like a year of production
and change.
Yeah, I was about to ask, like, how much of it was post production. Now, I mean, the winter effects, because you're in the middle of Pennsylvania somewhere, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I won't give your, I won't disclose your actual location, but
A nondescript.
did you like shoot the obviously you shot the outside scenes. I mean, that was real snow on the ground, right? That wasn't okay.
Absolutely.
I didn't think you had that big of a production budget, but
You can ask my crew if it was real snow.
oh, I can imagine. Because I noticed that everything looked really bleak. So were you like shooting like in the warmer months? Were you shooting the bunker stuff and then you saved the exteriors for the winter?
Yeah, the first day of shooting actually was the scene when the mom first leaves the bomb shelter. From the minute that she is actually outside, that was our first day of shooting. So we tried to shoot all the winter stuff while it was snowing, but of course that year it barely pissed snow. So we got what we could when we could. Then we started moving indoors, and when someone makes a low budget movie, for one, it's like, oh, this is people would tell me, filmmakers, when I pitched the movie, they're like, this is perfect. 2 characters, 1 location. This is cheap and easy. And I'm like, actually, it's 5 characters and like 15 locations, nighttime exteriors, but whatever.
Yeah, same difference.
I didn't want to be. I wanted I'm obsessed with detail and shit. I wanted it to be big. I'm like, I want to really show what we can do with this stuff. Like I want to be satisfied personally that we did as much as we possibly could. So I wrote. Also, I didn't want people to sit in the bomb shelter for a fucking hour and 10 minutes because it's too much. You need a break. So we would shoot some of the interior. We had a whole bunch of different locations we had to shoot. So we would shoot that. And then it's like, it just randomly snow. And I'm on the phone with everyone like, all right, guys, we're going out in the woods.
Go. Yeah.
We're going to do this thing. We got to shoot this tomorrow. It's snowing. And we would do that. And like the one day when we first were introduced to Santa and he takes the scroll out, that location, we dubbed it the Forbidden City. It was a lodge that burned down, and they knocked all the rubble down. Or they knocked it down, but they never cleared the rubble because they couldn't afford to,
so
I guess.
Still some remains there.
Yeah, there was like foundation and stuff like that. So that place was actively patrolled by police because people would hunt back there, and then kids would go there and like drink and do whatever. So we had to shoot there on a day where we knew there would be no police. So there was a day that was the coldest day on record in Pennsylvania for the last like 80 years. It was -12 with the wind chill.
Jesus Christ.
So we hiked a mile through the woods and we shot out and did all that shit. It was the most agonizingly cold thing ever. Like someone kicked over a cup of coffee and it froze in a 3-dimensional wave.
It's amazing.
And we duct taped chemical hand warmers all over our body and then put like 3 layers of clothes on. But Santa, his hands were exposed. He's wearing that gas mask and it just traps condensation. So it like froze to his face.
I was about to ask that because you had told me this story when we did a pre-interview last week, and I was looking at it because I had seen them. I watched the movie again with my wife on Monday, and I'm looking at his hands because you had told me that story, and I'm like, that's not makeup now, is it? He was fighting.
His hands look like
he was fighting frostbite. He was fighting frostbite at that point.
I mean, I did makeup on his hands, but they were so craggy and red from it being so fucking cold.
Listen,
and he didn't. And his boots were a size too small. So he actually cut the backs open and then laced them up so he could wear them. So he's like fully exposed to the cold. And Shannon is like one of the greatest human beings ever because he did not complain once. He was such a fucking trooper. And he was always raring to go no matter what we were doing. Actually, you guys probably didn't see him, but at the Jersey show, he was dressed as Santa in a gas mask, walking around handing out postcards that had Christmas cards that season's greetings from the end of the world with a fireplace and the gas mask.
That was really because I saw pictures. When was he there? How the hell did we miss him?
We were there Saturday and Sunday.
I think we might have seen him floating around, but again, we were just.
Well, when you approached me after the awards ceremony, he was standing next to me. He just wasn't in costume.
Well, by that time I was fried.
Yeah.
So
totally fried.
I was going to say, all that story just goes to show that sometimes you truly must suffer for your art, and
dude, he suffered so much. He really got the shit out of the state. No one can see his face. So no one, every time we get interviewed somewhere, no one knows who he is. I always feel so bad.
But no, he's a method actor. Like, he's being Santa in a hardcore apocalypse.
Mike, there's a couple, I mean, because we could segue. I wanted to get to, I don't know, I'm trying to figure this out because the thing about this movie is like when it comes to the production, when it comes to the short story, when it comes to the movie, there's so many things that kind of cross I'm trying to stay on one thing at a time. So I'm going to continue with the production.
Okay.
And there's a couple of things I wanted to talk about with the effects. The bathroom and the bathtub skeleton was like fucking amazing. Okay. The skeleton. I mean, you do use a lot of skeletons. The mother and the child on the floor. These skeletons were there. I mean, did you go to like the medical supply store and rent them?
Did you dig some up on your free time? Or
yeah, did you? Weren't you like, hey, I found this in the woods on the way to the scroll scene? You know, because the reason I'm asking is because a lot of them were like just natural color, so I could see them being rented. But the bathtub skeleton looked like it had flesh on it. It looked like it was rotted. It was.
Now, that's what a corpse would look like if you let it sit.
Well,
in a
yeah,
body of
but
water.
that's what I mean. Like from production wise, going into the skeletons. Oh, do we have a prop here? Oh, you got it. That's a bathtub skeleton.
Oh,
He's getting assaulted by his own
fucking
skeleton.
actors, right?
Yeah,
Jesus.
Talking about this guy.
Yeah. Did you construct him?
I did.
that's amazing.
This guy, I did all the skeletons for the movie. We did not rent them. They were. So actually on the DVD, hopefully I have a tutorial entirely about skeletons and how to age them.
Nice.
But I don't know if it's going to fit or not. It'll probably be on the Blu-ray. But that doesn't matter right now. I bought the skeletons. They are not quite medical skeletons. They are one of the, in the portrait studio scene, the dad skeleton is a medical skeleton. Those are called Bucky skeletons.
Uh-huh.
So I'm going to give you guys a weird little thing you probably never would have thought. There are several varieties of skeletons that one can buy. Bucky skeletons are anatomical skeletons. They weigh about 30 pounds and they're like $300. They're also covered with screws and they have a steel rod up the spine so they stay upright.
Yeah. I
had one of those, but I bought what's called a bargain basement Barney, which is a smaller than life-size skeleton. This guy's only about 5'4". I bought those, and then the thing is, you want fourth market skeletons, which means that they have factory defects. Maybe they have a slight discoloration or a missing piece here or there. So basically what it means is they come to you and they're like shitty. They're only like $70, $70 or $80.
bootleg skeletons. I fucking love it.
Yeah. So, I had to sand down all the flashing this doesn't have it, but between the ribs, there's like plastic spillover and shit. So it takes about 7 or 8 hours to clean them up. And then the skulls look like garbage. So I would buy anatomical skulls and then drill a hole through the bottom and then attach, like, this is an
Slap 'em
anatomical skull. And then I'd fix them up and then I would paint them with wood stain. And it's this insanely tedious, toxic, very, very toxic process to make them look old and aged. And, that's what I did for the regular skeletons. Then all their clothes, I bought all the clothes they were wearing was brand new. And then I went and I aged it. I tea stained it, all that stuff. There's no actual dirt on anybody in the movie. It's all makeup and paint. So I did all that. It took a long time to do the wardrobe and I put hair on them and shit. This guy was a bargain basement Barney. And then, actually you can see better in his midsection. Like he's very thin.
Yeah.
I took plastic wrap, like 0.3 millimeter tarping, like painter's drop cloth, and I spray adhesive over the bones, then wrapped him in various layers of that, and then took a heat gun and just started blasting melts. You basically sculpt with hot air, and again, this is extremely toxic, melting plastics.
Don't try it at home unless you're professional.
But what it gave me was, you can see like in his face these like, webbed up areas and stuff. I would sit there and I just glue pieces and then melt them and do that over and over again until
sort of like smelting or like blacksmithing a skeleton, if you will. With
pretty much, yeah. A very tedious process. And sorry, I'll lay him down.
That's cool.
And then I would paint that with wood stain and then wipe it out. Like, you'd paint some on, then you'd wipe it, get it all the crevices. So he took about 2 weeks to make. He was an extremely tedious prop to build. And then when he's in the bathtub, I used my fake blood recipe, but I swapped out the colors and I made it like sludge. So there was a lot of chocolate in there, actually. And then I'm actually cutting the behind the scenes of the scene right now. I covered him in this stuff, and then I splashed the bathtub with it. When you watch movies, you always see, like, especially low-budget movies, you always see blood splatter that's like big arcs and spatters, and none of it actually makes any sense.
Yeah.
And I really hate that, because when you're doing effects, you need to understand, like, okay, if he swings the knife or machete that way,
go this
and
way.
where blood will spray, like the arc of it and everything, that's a very big thing for me. So I'm like, okay, if this guy was rotten, I wanted him to be rotten in the bathtub. My original concept for that was the bathtub was going to be completely filled with black sludge, which is, again, very Resident Evil.
Yep.
And the skeleton was going to be kind of floating in there like he liquefied, and then just the bones were there, which was something that I read about in a pathology book.
Yeah.
Written by an EMT, that they had found a guy who had a heart attack while he was taking a bath, an old man, and he basically boiled in the bath water, and he just turned to soup
Jesus.
with a skeleton in it.
Yeah, I had a friend who was an EMT. Same thing happened. Guy who killed himself in a hotel room. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very unpleasant. So I wanted to do that. So I splashed this black gunk everywhere, and then I took a spray bottle of warm water, and I kept spraying it and letting it run and then dry. And then I'd spray more, and I'd do it in layers, so eventually it just became like a film of goo. And all the discernible splotch, like drips and everything, kind of went away, so it just looked like he was oozing, and then maybe he bloated at one point and popped, and then it all just slid down the middle. So that was the concept for that. That took a couple hours to do that bathtub thing too, and of course everyone's like, it looks fine. I'm like, it's not good enough, damn it. One more time.
I totally understand that completely. Real quick before we move on, because I really want to talk about some questions I had regarding the story and recording the movie. Just do me a quick favor and Riley's teeth. I noticed you had
Talk about the teeth.
You had a really interesting story about Riley's teeth.
Yeah, so Riley Reed Blasey, the actor, he was 7 when we started the movie. And as children age, as I discovered, they tend to get into scuffles and bruises and cuts, and sometimes they lose teeth. Well, in filmmaking, there's the dirty C word, continuity.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, we were shooting on weekends whenever we could, so it could be 3 months between shoots, depending on everyone's schedule. And I got a text from Pam, who was Reeve's mom, and he's like, Reeve lost a tooth. And she sent me a picture, and I panicked, and I'm like, oh my god, the fuck am I going to do?
Got a
This kid
retcon.
lost his teeth. And I'm like, oh my god. So, immediately, because like I said, being a good director or filmmaker is thinking on your feet, I constructed this backstory in my head, like, okay, radiation sickness, he's losing his teeth. And I'm like, keep the tooth!
Yeah.
So I wrote this whole scene where he starts losing his teeth from being sick, and she hides them under his pillow for the tooth fairy, and like all this stuff. I was like,
it's amazing.
This is so horrible. I was like, I can't punch the audience anymore. Like, I can't.
I kind of would have. That should be like an alternate, like, if you're doing the director's cut, whatever, like alternate scenes, how to solve problems with children in filmmaking.
That's another question I have to ask you. I mean, I love the fact that you're like, hey, we might need to like give your son radiation, save his teeth, radiation sickness.
So we lost 3 teeth throughout the movie, and if you look, you can see that he's missing. We tried to hide it with lighting, and I edited around the parts where his mouth is open a lot, but you never quite get a full-on clear shot of how many teeth he has.
Yeah.
He did a really good job at like I know a lot of like early vampire movies, like or Dark Shadows, if you watch that early series.
Hide your lip.
He did a really good job of talking while hiding his.
Yeah, we were lucky. He was good. We didn't end up shooting anything with the teeth, but his mom had them. Just
That's awesome that you asked him. But see, like, here's the thing. As we sort of talked about it earlier and on the review, is that it's funny because as you said, when that happened, you're like, shit, I gotta write a whole new backstory to explain it, like, blah, 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 right? Like, and I get that, like, I somewhat could see, like, doing the same thing. However, I wouldn't have been, like, upset if it's just in there without commented upon, just a detail. You're like, and the audience might infer it anyways without like.
Well, and that's what ended up happening. Is people like I think that you said it, Chris. Just like, yeah, I like this. It's passage of. I'm like, it's passage of time. Like it works still.
Yeah, it's still continuity. Like you don't have to retcon anything really, or again introduce some other vaguely expository thing. Although I do think, as you said, it would have been not funny, but I would have liked it more if indeed you included that scene specific to address like another gut punch, just for the hell of it.
And real quick, did anybody have you gotten any shit about like killing a kid in your movie? Like, especially Santa
No.
Claus? Really?
Surprisingly, no. I was
Do
fucking
people like it? 'Cause I
terrified that
do.
we were gonna get like slaughtered for that because when we strangle that kid, we choke him out
It's
more
realistic.
graphically than
Yeah.
most adults get choked in
Yeah.
movies because I wanted it to be
Yeah.
realistic.
Yeah, and I loved it
I mean,
because of that.
in Battlestar Galactica, I mean, they're still getting shit about killing an infant in the pilot of that, and I'm sitting here thinking, Santa Claus is choking this kid. You see his tongue swelling. You see his little hand letting go, and him being dropped to the floor. I'm like, how much shit are you getting?
Nah, it was so good.
And Reeves' mom, like, if you ever see her, like, credit to her. Give Reed my best. I mean, Reeve did a great job, and props to his parents for like, all right, I'm letting this guy kill my son.
Well, when we auditioned him, that was really funny because we auditioned a bunch of kids, and I had people. I'm like, okay, I put it up on Facebook. I'm like, we're looking for a kid for a horror movie. They're like, I've got a son, and I'm like, send me a video of him just being him, because you can't really ask a child to act. You can only get them to kind of shape how they're being, but they need to be themselves. So people would send me videos, and I found a few kids that were promising, and I'm like, okay, have them come over. I talk to their parents, and I'm like, before this goes any further, here is the short story. I want you to be aware of what this is. Instantly, we have our potentials. Like half of them gone immediately. The parents like, oh no.
It's a good litmus
It's
test.
like, okay. Now, Reeve, his parents, Pam and Matt Blasey. Matt is, we were just talking about this on the pre-show, Matt is actually in Land of the Dead and Survival of the Dead as a zombie. He's a big the biggest Romero nut you'll ever see. And he was friends with George Romero and all those guys. So Reeve has grown up with all of this shit.
Surrounded by it.
I mean, his middle name is Romero. It's Reeve Romero Blasey.
That's badass.
That is awesome.
I figured that of all the kids, like, because he happened to be the best for the part too, but, his parents obviously were like, we're okay with this. And I knew we weren't going to traumatize him because he thought everything was cool on set. He thought it was really neat. And he saw the skeletons and stuff. He was
like
was
fucking
really
around
cool.
with them.
Yeah, he was having a blast. So I was still worried because despite what people may think after they watch the movie and see anything else I've done, like, I love kids and I'm very sensitive to their psychology. I don't want to, I don't want to fuck with the kid's head, with this type of shit. So I said to him, I'm like, buddy, we're going to have to kill you in the movie. And he was all excited about it. And he was showing me his death poses that he does.
Awesome.
I was like, Santa Claus is going to do it. And he looked up at me and I'm like, here we go. And I was like, now it's not the real Santa Claus. And he said, well, duh, Santa's busy making toys.
Best answer.
And I was like, yes, that's exactly what it is. Santa is off in the North Pole. He's far too busy to be in our film.
Totally.
So we have an actor. And I'm like, this is going to go beautifully.
That's fantastic.
But yeah, I want to adjust that last thing because if you know me or other episodes, I'm not the biggest fan of children in real life, just in general. That's just me. So when I happen to see a child actor in any film whatsoever, it's always like, ugh, God. But as I mentioned, like, again, I honestly, like, thought he was better in this film than I've seen in, like, many other films. Like, one of the better child actors I've seen, given for what it was. But what I really want to say is that your story, White Doomsday, set up the fact that, like, if you're paying attention and if you're, like, knowing the horror tropes and just in general, you know that this kid has to die somehow. Like, it's, even before Santa showed, like, his mother is planning to kill him because it's a mercy killing, right? So
everyone wants him dead.
Yeah.
Like, the thing is, like, it's almost like seriously like a foregone conclusion, like, perhaps cynically, but the story sets that up. So the fact, like, me personally, when I saw Santa in the film roll out that scroll with his name on it, I'm like, he's gonna come kill him in some way, shape, or form. And I remember, Chris, I was like, that's awesome. I'm pretty sure I said that, like, something like that. So I couldn't wait for it, but I'm just saying, if you're a smart enough, savvy enough fan, and you're watching this film, it's obvious that that's what's gonna happen. Maybe not prepared for, like, how graphic it might be, but nevertheless, and again, to me, I got out of, like, Santa has to come kill this kid. Like, that has to be the fucking ending. There's no other possible ending.
Because when I was making the movie, and I was like, people are always, like, shocked at how it ends, and I'm like, exactly what you said. I'm like, if you start watching this movie, I set up in the first 15 minutes, like, it's the trajectory that this movie goes, like, outside of the twist that Santa Claus comes, you know exactly what's going to happen. Like,
exactly.
Well, this movie,
the audience's fear that this is how it's going to end, but it's a movie, so it's safe. So of course we're not going to do that. But it's like, no, we're definitely going to do that. You're going to have to sit and watch agonizingly as this goes on. And that's it. Like,
yeah, I love that. I'm just saying, like, again, as a storyteller, as a student of narrative, as we all are here, and what you try to episodes talking about that is that as you said, it's set up, right? The framework is there. You should be fairly early on prepared for that, as you said, and yeah, maybe not quite to the extent that it happens, but nevertheless that it's going to happen in some way. So I really like that. Like I said, it was not funny, but a well done scene when Santa comes and strangles.
But the thing is,
Reese, like, very horribly.
It's the context.
It had to be that ending.
It's the context of which it is, because you set up pretty well that Santa Claus isn't malevolent. That he is remorseful.
He's a tragic figure himself, for sure.
Yes. And this is where this is a good time to segue, because it did start out as a short story. And right off the bat from the short story, you pick up where Kelly is, planning on killing Riley.
Yes.
You set up the weed killer, and then the next thing you bring in Santa.
The poison cookies with
and
the weed
he's,
killer.
The poison cookies with the weed killer with the poison cookies. And then Santa Claus, he's gone, you see him remorseful. He's passing by some cannibals.
Reluctant cannibals.
So right off the bat, in the story you did. Now, in the movie, when I saw the movie at the first time and then reading it, I was kind of I was interested because it seems that I was interested. I found it interesting because it seemed like Simon was not resolved to their fate. Like he was still like, what did we survived? We do now. Well, we keep surviving.
He had some glimmer of possible hope.
He went out and kept scavenging, whereas Kelly seemed to be more like, let's just stay together as long as we can be together. And so in the story, I knew that we had picked up on her. She was
more resigned to the fate.
Decided on that. But in the movie, like going into it, is Simon like more like has not accepted it? And at the beginning, well, technically in the beginning, because there's a couple of time jumps, has Kelly, at what point, do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, at what point does Kelly decide that...
Is she already resigned to, is she already thinking about suicide and how to get out with the kid?
Exactly.
So it's interesting you say that, because I actually had the kind of opposite intention with the characters a little bit, because in the movie, Simon is the one that pulls the bullets out of the gun and hands them to her and says, this is our way out if things get bad. He's being a realist. He's the one who says, she's in denial is what it is. And it's not so much that she's resigned to her fate, but we can stay down here, like she still has hope that someone is going to save them, because that's what we're taught, is that when there is a disaster, the military will come, Red Cross will come, someone will save us, because in our lives, we are the main characters, so we can't die. But that's not how it fucking works.
Yeah.
And most of all, what I wanted to get across with this movie is that you don't get answers in real life, and shit sucks, and the universe will kick your fucking teeth in no matter what you want. And I wanted to portray real life as accurately as I could. And Simon was like, you need to go out and get food or we're going to die. That's a fucking fact. I need to go out there. And she's like, and then she implies that there's something out there that's dangerous. We don't know what it is, and it's never really explicitly stated. And that I wanted to just add to the mystery of what was going on. In the short story, it's a little bit more stated that there's creatures of some kind, but again, we don't really talk about it.
Again, it's dropped in there, but it's not, like, again, fleshed out. And I said it doesn't need to be. Like, I would dislike it if you flesh it out either in the story or in the film more, because the mystery is good enough on its own. In fact,
the
better.
apocalypse is not the plot.
Yes.
This is a character piece. The apocalypse is the backdrop.
Exactly.
And so with Kelly, she is starting, I mean, you can see the thoughts going in, like you can watch her face, you can see, she's in her head all the time. You can see when she starts to think about this. It's like, because with the time jumps, if you look at the calendar closely, there's a date circled. That's like 2 weeks prior when she crosses off the first date in the beginning of the movie. That's when he left. Or it's implied that's when he left.
Yeah.
He's been gone for like 2 weeks. So it's like she's already thinking he's not coming back. So she's in the absolute depths of depression at this point. And then when their food supplies, which we had talked in your review, you had said that the cans dwindling is how we see time progressing. And you can see in the background there's more pictures that he's drawn on the wall.
Yeah, all that kind of detail,
Little stuff like that, is I didn't want to hold the audience's hand with the time jumps and with the flashback scenes. And through doing that, I wanted her to get into a worse and worse headspace. And then eventually when she takes out those bullets, she remembers that flashback where she remembers when he gives her the bullets. And she's like, what is this? I can't even comprehend what you're doing here.
Right.
And a couple of people had mentioned on that topic, they're like, why would he give her bullets and then leave with no gun? Like, why would he do that? But the point of it was those 3 bullets are their insurance policy.
Yep.
They're set aside as almost if there was a little case that said in case of suicide, break glass.
Well, it's kind of the way I kind of figured it is like, well, if he hits in any trouble, he's just like, well, I'm going to have this many bullets because if I make it back, at least I'll have those 3. Like you said, it's an insurance policy.
Yep.
Exactly. And he fully intends to come back. He's going out with the intention of trying to provide for his family. Unfortunately, he doesn't come back. We don't know what happened to him. And then she, when she takes out those bullets, she's starting to think about suicide. Obviously, when she comes back, she steals that bag from the wounded girl and finds the gun. At that point, like, I could have ended the movie right there. Like, she fully, if those bullets would have fit, she would have shot him in the head and shot herself. That was the point of that. Like, she was ready. And then when that didn't work, she found that can lid and she's like, I'm going to cut my fucking wrist.
I fucking love that little... To me, like,
or assuming if she didn't have her tetanus,
whatever. Yeah. You got to worry about tetanus in the apocalypse for sure.
No, when she cut her.
That was the other plot line I was going for. She gets lockjaw, and then the radio comes to life, and it's a rescue mission, but she can't talk.
That's a fucking Twilight Zone episode.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, I thought about it because she gets the idea of cutting her wrists when she cuts the can.
Now that we can talk about that one scene with the gun thing specifically, as an outright spoiler. Like, that was one of the best subversions that I really loved because, again, as you were just saying, like, it's what would happen in reality, right? Everyone's like, you've seen that in movies, in zombie movies, and other movies too. If I don't come back, here's the X bullets, whatever, it's for you. Yeah, except now I have a different gun and the fucking bullets don't fit. Like, what the fuck am I supposed to do?
That's the funniest thing.
In video games and movies, they always have, it's like, oh, here's, 9mm... like whatever brass casing, blah blah. Of course, this fits like my shotgun.
Yeah, I got my 7 point.
It always works.
Yeah,
like,
you got your 7.
In your daily life, where do you go that you just find ammunition and guns laying around?
Yeah.
Like that's not
it's
a thing.
It's not fucking interchangeable. But yeah, so then when it cuts to her like taking out the can, like the sharpened top of the can, like that's awesome because that's practical and it's something she has. So like I'm just saying, like that was one of the highlights for me because it was such a great subversion and a great touch that it was way more clever than I've seen in like huge, bigger budget films by far. So, yeah.
Thank you.
And I like, yeah, exactly. Right when you see the gun, you can tell it's a smaller.
And then, of course, I also love like her final idea is to her suicide MacGyver is to crush up the weed killer and sprinkle as if it were frosting on cookies. It's fucking genius.
Which again is like a horrible way to die.
Yeah. So
if it would have even, well, yeah, I was gonna say only because he's in his weakened state might it killed him. I mean, yeah,
but still, and she doesn't. She's a normal suburban housewife. She sees poison.
Yeah.
That's it. She doesn't know what it will do because what weed killer really does, it strips the wax off of the leaves of the plant, and it doesn't allow them to hold moisture anymore, so they dehydrate. That's how weed killer kills weeds. So it would have been a hideous way for him to die.
It's a prolonged, like, agonizing death.
But the thing is, she's thinking in her head,
I need something.
I can't cut him with the can. I can't do it. She's like, I can do this to myself, but I can't do it to him.
Yeah.
And the cookies, at least it's one of those things that I came from was I have a weird obsession with household chemicals and like just how hideous it would be. Like I always had I had a short story I was writing a long time ago I never finished about a guy who just he went just this crazy guy, he was batshit nuts for whatever reason, and he becomes extremely paranoid. And there's like a cable repair truck parked outside of his house, and he's convinced it's like a surveillance vehicle. And he's like, he gets a gun and he's like camped out in his house, like, and a Girl Scout rings his doorbell trying to sell cookies. And he abducts her thinking that she's part of fucking plant. So he ties her to his radiator, and he's like interrogating her, and she won't answer him, and he ends up injecting her with antifreeze.
It's like the reverse
it's like,
poison ivy.
This is the most hideous thing I could think of. And, when I was a kid, my mom would crush up pills and like put it in applesauce so I would take medicine when I didn't want to. And it's like, how can you kill your kid without him knowing that you're killing him? Because that's like, to me, I feel like that's even worse than the fact that they have to die, is shouldering the weight of knowing that they know what you're going to do is such a betrayal.
Yep.
So it's because people are like, why did you smother him with a pillow? It's like, well, because that's so hard. Like, that's terrifying. That's a really violent way to die. And in her head, it's like, oh, he'll just die in his sleep from poison.
Right.
And if he's starving, he probably would. I mean, he'd probably be vomiting up his guts for a while, but I mean,
Yeah, it's the attrition that's going to kill him,
again,
and it's going to be miserable.
It's a great touch, and you get like two sides of the coin, if you will, if you know, like, again, more about it. But yeah, I just love that little touch as well, like the triple subversion, if you will. The guns and the bullets don't fit, and then the can, but I can't do that to him, so I'll give him, like, in quotes, a nice peaceful death, although not knowing how that's going to actually kill somebody.
And she sets up the Last Christmas because, she wants...
Sure.
She's... And this goes into the backstory of why I made the movie, too, which I guess we'll talk about when you're ready for that. But she kind of gives the ultimate sacrifice in that she's shouldering the weight of reality. In the entire movie, she never lets on how bad things are for this kid. Like, he has no idea how terrible things are. And she keeps that illusion up to the last moment.
Yep.
And she has to shoulder that guilt, knowing that's so much harder to do than expressing it and saying, like, this is what's going on and trying to explain to a kid, even in kid terms.
Yeah.
Her doing that is she sacrifices the last shred of hope and sanity she has to make sure that he has as much as he possibly can and still be able to retain the innocence of being a child in the situation.
Absolutely, man.
Before we go, because we should probably get going soon, there is a comparison between the book and the movie that I want to ask you.
I mean the novel. I mean the short story.
I keep saying book.
I keep trolling Chris over it.
Yeah, I keep,
off cast he kept saying book, and I said, you mean the short story?
Your short story is now a book.
Anyway.
You had a neighbor named Jack, and she went over there and exchanged, she had sex with him.
Prostitutes herself.
Yeah.
Services, yeah.
And they both felt remorse on it. And to be honest with you, it worked in the book, but what you did in the movie, and it was when she sees the girl in the bathtub, okay, in the bath. The thing she's like, she just lost her brother, and she tries to lift her up, and then Ian commented on the sound effect that she had a broken leg and she wasn't going to move.
He really loved that part. That sound design there.
And Kelly...
In the Jersey show, that everyone in the audience jumped out of their seat when they heard that crack.
Yeah.
It's so visceral. It's amazing.
Two times seen that movie and I still cringed both times. She grabs the backpack, takes them to Riley, and it really broke my heart, the fact that she had like 3 cookies, a little thing of dippers, and a third of a bottle of plastic water. So I thought that was really great in terms of this, because it kind of did keep her pure, considering she was thinking about killing her son. But my question is, and I was thinking this, would Kelly, if she could have walked, what would have Kelly done? I mean, would her compassion won over and like try to figure a way to get the 3 of them to survive? What really would she have done?
See, that's interesting, because that's what I wanted the audience to be thinking about, is what would I do in that situation? The reason I changed it from the story into the movie was exactly what you said, and not that I wanted to keep her pure, but I felt the movie did not have any sex. It has no gore. Well, there's some gore, but there's no language or anything. I wanted to keep it more wholesome, if that makes any sense, is because it's true to the characters. And I just felt like... Yeah, and I felt like when apocalypse movies happen, it's always the scavenging thugs always want to rape everybody. Like, it's a trope that I don't particularly care for. And in the story, I wanted to make, that's why I made them, like, I think the line is, he cried while he did it and he wouldn't look her in the eye.
Yeah.
Like, he's ashamed of himself. And I wanted that to be, it's like, this is not fun for anybody. It's just a base human need for contact. And I felt like I could take that same idea that she would do anything for a child and then turn it into something a little more fitting for what the tone of the movie was going to be. So that's why I had her steal the bag. But that scene, it's almost like you think she might have saved her, or tried, until she realized that she can't walk, and she just looks at it and she's like, you can see it on her face. She's like,
you're going to be dead weight, almost literally. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have a son. She's like, I have to take my own over you. And in the original script, actually, when she finds that eaten corpse, she was going to follow a blood trail to that door, and you could see the glow stick light underneath it, which I'm obsessed with green lights. But also, those are emergency lights. That's what people use.
Yeah, yeah.
They float. They're waterproof. Use them for hurricanes and stuff. But the door was going to be clawed to shit, and there was blood all over it. So this thing had been. And there was actually more dialogue with the wounded girl. She's saying, "I've been stuck in here for 4 days. It knows I'm in here, and it won't leave. It comes back every night. It knows I'm here." And I was going to have Hope steal the bag and run, not shutting the door. And as she's running down the house,
thing comes in.
hears something barreling down the hallway in the darkness,
That's awesome.
and she bolts out of the house, and then you hear the girl screaming.
That would have been great, too. I love it all.
It would have been cool, and we ran out of time, and I wish I could have done it. I didn't have the money to buy a door to claw up, but then I was like, again, it's one of those moments where if I show that much, the audience is going to be thinking about that the entire time. Like, what was that thing?
Well,
is that going to come back?
Right. It's almost becomes distracting, as cool as it would have been. I see what you mean, but yeah.
But
There's some alternate takes and all, but yeah.
But to me, the what really impacted is when she comes home, or she comes back to the shelter and finds out that she got 3 cookies, a pack of dips, and a gun that wouldn't fit bullets. And I mean, it was really heartbreaking at that point. So basically, it's like, leave it to your imagination whether Kelly would have saved this girl or not.
Yeah. Well, I want you to decide that. Like, what would you do in that situation? Is how I wanted people to think. And that whole sequence too, where she takes the bag open and she opens it. That entire scene, we talked about music for that, the whole production, and we got to editing, and I was like, I'm not putting a fucking single note of music in
Dead
this.
silence. Yeah.
Are you kidding? And I'm like, they're like, this is like a 4-minute scene, and I'm like, I'm gonna make the audience sit and watch in real time as she realizes what she did. And that everything, just the weight of everything just completely crushes her. And she's crying into her hands because she doesn't want to wake him up. Just that whole sequence, you can really see the gears turning in her head.
It's totally crushing. And good call.
That was really impactful. And taking the less is more approach was great. Great performances all around. Like I said, I had to ask that because I was wondering what happened in your mind, but
yeah,
I agree with you. I am sick of that. Like, in the apocalypse, there's no humanity in it. And, it is a great movie. I recommend everybody see it if you've not seen the movie. Well, if you're this far into it, we've just blown most of the movie.
See it when it comes out, and for yourself, seriously, to see all the little like details, like you said, every scene in context and in order, and see how we tease out of it, and how Mike did it and then shot it and framed it and so forth.
But that is also the thing, is context is key.
Yeah.
And if you come this far, you have a lot. We have behind the scenes. You've got a lot of spoilers, but you do leave a lot, and it is the process going through it. I mean, the reason it's so affecting is because of the pace. It does not feel at 71 minutes. It feels longer than that, but it never gets bogged down.
But like I said, in a good way.
Yeah, it doesn't get bogged down. And so even if you've gotten this far and you haven't seen it, I highly recommend seeing this movie. As I told you, and I'm not just saying this, Mike, seriously, it was definitely one of the best movies. All right, you released it in 2017. I saw it in 2018. But it is one of the best movies I've seen in the last year.
It's my new favorite Christmas movie, 100% for sure, as I said.
If we're going to talk 2018 movies, it's you and Black Panther right up there. So
that's really, White Doomsday, Black Panther, it makes sense.
Double feature. Santa Slays is pretty good, but I think White Doomsday has now eclipsed it.
But listen, we're definitely talking about having you back on the show in certain
Yes, we'd love to have you for a number of more episodes, which we will.
No,
and we're definitely going to revisit. I'm dreaming of a White Doomsday. The DVD and Blu-ray are going to be released in the fall.
We're hoping. We don't have a set date yet, but we're hoping for November-ish.
So in time for Christmas.
Yeah, I'm trying. That's
just in time.
Very. It'll be out for Christmas. Let's just say that.
Awesome.
I've got some things cooking, but yeah, it'll be out for Christmas.
Nice. And is there any other plugs? I know you mentioned Simon's actor Damien. Give him a shout out. He's the
good point.
The dad, Damien Maffei. He is actually the man in the mask in The Strangers Pray at Night. The guy in the sack, the lead killer. That is Damien.
Yeah, so check that out.
Not saying that he got the role because of White Doomsday,
but he's not saying that either. Yeah, so Mike, check that out as well.
And if you've gotten this far, Mike, are there any film festivals that it's going to be showing up at,
upcoming in the next couple months?
Where can they see this until November?
Yeah, so the film festival that we just got into actually yesterday, Days of the Dead in Charlotte. It'll be, I think that's May, I want to say 18th to the 20th, I believe. It's going to be playing there. I don't have the schedule on that yet. And
Look it up yourselves, but it'll be at that festival.
yeah, I have another acceptance, but I can't announce it because this will air like 4 days beforehand, but it's a big one.
Nice.
So just check the Real Splatter Facebook.
Mystery NDA announcement.
And realsplatter.com, and we'll have the screenings on there. But there is a big one that's coming up, and I have leads on other ones too, but I'm not allowed to say anything. But it will be playing other places through up until probably October.
Nice. Yeah.
You'll have a chance.
The point is, there will be many avenues and venues to check this out, and you absolutely should.
And Mike's a friend of the show, so he'll let us know, and social media will get Steve-O to work on that.
We'll get the updates out for you for sure, but yeah.
Thank you.
Mike, thank you again so much for being on the show. Great movie. We will be posting the links of the film festivals and so forth with this interview.
As you're allowed to release them to us and to the public at large.
And again, we'll definitely revisit the movie back in the fall, and hopefully we're going to see you between then and now when you have time as a guest on one of the shows, or more of one.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Thank you for coming on for sure.
And I've been Chris Morgan with Scott Thurlow.
See you next time.
With Mike Lombardo, and we'll see you next time. Good night.
Cheers.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.